Welcome to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, where we talk to computer scientists who immigrated from their home countries for study or for work or for other reasons. In these oral history interviews, you will find established and renowned computer scientists from across academia and industry narrating their experiences of immigrating from where they grew up to a completely different land, often the US. My name is Indy Gupta, and I'm your host. This is a remix episode. As usual, you can find all episodes and detailed episode guides on our website, csimmigrant.org. Again, that's csimmigrant.org. And you can find us and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and basically wherever you get your podcasts. This episode is structured into acts or chapters. You'll find chapter markers on your audio player, and you can use these to jump between the acts or chapters. This is a remix episode. Illnesses, diseases. As computer scientists, in our drive to succeed, whether we are in industry or in academia, we sometimes forget that we are still human beings, and our bodies can suffer illnesses and diseases, sometimes minor and we recover quickly, and sometimes they're major illnesses. In this episode, we talk with two computer scientists who encountered major illnesses in their lives. First, Ricardo Baeza-Yates suffered tuberculosis as a child, and second, Regina Barzilay was diagnosed with cancer when she was already a professor at MIT. Listen to how these two amazing human beings and amazing computer scientists not just navigated their adversities, but also used their experiences as a way of improving themselves, their education, and their research directions. Ricardo Baeza-Yates, professor at Northeastern University in Silicon Valley, and also leader of multiple Yahoo labs across 4 continents. Ricardo grew up in Chile in South America, starting from the 1960s. But he's lived and worked on 4 continents: Europe, South America, Asia, and North America. Here's my conversation with Ricardo Baeza-Yates.
Also, when I was in 5th grade, I think because of my sister going first to school, but the doctor didn't take care well of my case, I got tuberculosis. So I had some shades in my lungs, and I had to be around 6 months in bed and 2 years treatment. So because of that, I couldn't go to school. And then I had to basically pass grade by doing exams that were free, taken in the Ministry of Education. So I was not really a good student, but I had very good memory. Or maybe I was a good student because I passed these 2 years of basically 5th grade and I would say maybe 6th grade and 7th grade. I passed it as a free student, so I was not formally in school for those 2 years because of this illness. And then I went to a high school and I was a student that was okay, but was not really the top. But I started to have better grades on high school.
That is a lot of adversity very early on in your life. Do you feel like you had a supporting environment at home with your mother and your sisters, or did you become independent very early on in life?
Yes, I think I had a lot of support. That my mother had to work from the beginning because of my father leaving. Something very important is that my grandfather had also like a depression, and he taught me to read and write. I was his first grandchildren, and basically I think that marked me because before going to school I already knew how to read and write, so that was an advantage. And he used a dictionary to teach me, like a classical, what's it called, Larousse. I don't know if it's a French dictionary. That at the beginning is just a dictionary, but the second part is more like an encyclopedia, like a small one. And I think I like that part because it had maps, it had photos of animals and so on. So for example, from that time, geography started to be my hobby. and I'm a geography geek. So I know many things that most people don't know because of my grandfather. But sadly, he died in an accident when I was 9 years old. So that was another adversity in the sense that my grandmother, which was, I guess, the support of all the family at that time, my maternal grandmother, she had to work too, like my mother. So and so basically, all the people that were supporting me until 9 years old were more busy. But then a lot of aunts came to the rescue because my mother had 4 sisters, younger sisters, that help on that. For example, with my youngest aunt, we have only 11 years of difference. And then this like big family, more like it's very interesting because it's more like I would say this family that when they gather, they can gather 100 people, and I have like 33 cousins from my mother's side and so on, and of course more and more grand nieces and nephews and so on. So it was tough. But at the same time, there was a family that really had a lot of support. So I have good memories about that. Really, it looks worse than it is really.
Of course, you had a little bit of a disadvantage because you were not able to go to school for a couple of years because of your illness. Would you say that your interest in science and math was very clear early on in life, or did it just grow over time because you were good in a lot of things, you were interested in a lot of things?
I think my interest because of my grandfather, who I mentioned, and also because when I was at school, I was in a very small English school, and the director of the school died just before I think I entered the school, and then his wife, instead of going back to England because they was British, decided to stay at school and run the school of his husband. But she was not a teacher. But then she wanted to be a teacher. And she said, what is I will teach a course. And she invented the amazing course that was called General Knowledge. So in every class, I had a completely different thing, like a Greek mythology in one class, history in another class. And every class, every week was kind of opening the world. So I will say that because of my grandfather and this teacher, Winifred was her name, Winifred, I was more like a renaissance this time. So you wanted to know everything because every time I was having a new thing that was very interesting. So really, I liked everything, and because of my illness, I read a lot. So the only thing I could do in bed, we didn't have enough money to have more than one TV, so the TV was not in my idea. I couldn't have a TV, only had a radio and books. So basically, I either had to listen to music or reading, and so I started reading a lot. So I started to love science fiction. So maybe there comes the science with science fiction. So I read all of Asimov, all of Bradbury, all of Ursula Le Guin, etc. So all the famous, and luckily people brought me books to read, and I read a lot of things, all the classics on, of course, like pirates, either Salgari, for example. I don't know, many people don't know Salgari, but he had this, he never traveled, he was Italian, but he never traveled, but he invented this pirate in Indonesia and this other pirate in the Caribbean, and the stories were nice, and again, because I like maps, I was following the stories in the maps.
That's a very interesting series of classes to study in school, kind of like a random walk through general knowledge with your...
Well, it was amazing. I think it should be a course everywhere because it's like a random walk on interesting things, right?
Yeah. And I think keeping the curiosity engaged is, I think, the important thing there.
Exactly that. They basically, if I had all the potential to be a researcher, I think I started there because I was curious then from the start. And you need to be curious to be a researcher.
The next voice is Regina Barzilay, professor at MIT. Regina grew up in Moldova or Moldavia, a nation in East Europe. Then she immigrated to Israel in 1990, did her bachelor's in Israel. Then she immigrated to the US in 1997 as a housewife, but then did her PhD in the US. Here's my conversation with Regina Barzilay. Regina Barzilay moved to the US in 1997 as a housewife, then got a PhD from Columbia, and became a faculty at MIT in 2003. In 2014, she was shocked to learn that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked her about her immediate reaction to this news and the long repercussions of that significant event on her life and on her career. Here's Regina. So moving forward in the timeline, I want to ask a little bit about your experience in around 2014 when you were diagnosed with breast cancer. The diagnosis for any kind of cancer is usually a very slow-moving process with many tests over a long period of time. You usually never know, okay, this is it. It's usually, okay, let's try the next test. How did you mentally react to that at that stage in your career where you're already tenured, you already have a research group, and you already have a family, but mentally, how did you react to that?
So this was like the biggest shock of my life because I was healthy. The only time I was in the hospital is when I gave birth to my son. And, I couldn't believe it because they always say it's 1 in 8, but you always think that you are the 7th one because I never had any cancer in my family. And, I did mammogram. They told me go do the mammogram. I did the mammogram, but, I never expected that we were going to hear something different. So I still remember, I went to... So I did several mammograms, and then on the 3rd year of doing mammograms, I remember I went to Mount Auburn. This is a hospital. It's funny because Mount Auburn is both a hospital and the cemetery at Cambridge. So you need to qualify. It's a hospital. They're close to each other. It was a hospital, so I went there. And I remember they sort of told me, you have something, let's just in case go and do biopsy. And I said, okay. And I was really stressed. It was like tremendously stressful. And I don't think that I actually ever seen anybody who, and it's not true. I've seen some people, but I've seen some people, not very close people, but I've seen people. And it was very stressful. Then I did one biopsy. It was the end of April. And I pretty much knew what will be fully my course of treatment by the end of July. So there was something in the middle, but like by the end of July, I knew I'm going to have chemo, and I started my chemo. But until then, I didn't know. So it was really bizarre times. It was on one hand, I go through all this medical tests. I didn't say anything to my students because, I would tell them when I know what's going on, but I didn't know what's going on. And one of my students won Best Paper Award in ACL during the time. And, and they're so happy. And it's like, who cares? But I try to be nice, and I showed my excitement. And then, you just go. The hardest part is actually when you don't know. Because once you know, you have like physical pains and stuff, but at least the course is clear.
And so at any point, did you think that, maybe I only have a few years left? Or was the course of the treatment clear to you from the diagnosis point?
So you really don't know. You really don't know. Like at the moment that you hear the word cancer, you hear this is the end, and you stop believing the doctor because what is your chance? Your chance is tiny, and all of a sudden they tell you have it and say it's 99% that you're fine. What exactly does it mean? I was at tiny percent. So you stop believing the numbers. You forget probability as applied to you, and you always expect the worst. And first it's like there are periods. There is a period when you try to understand what exactly do you have, because it takes a while. You need to do, some lumpectomy, they analyze it, whatever. It takes a while. So you kind of leave to the next test, to the result of next test. Then when that part is done, when, the real serious chemo starts, you are really in a messed up state. I think in the following way, because you don't know what's to come on one hand. On the other hand, usual life, as you know, when you just go to work and you do your stuff and you go back, is sort of messed up. But the treatment in some ways kind of consuming, that you, at the end, you just need to do one day at a time. And that's what you do. You do one day at a time.
There are many professionals who are cancer survivors, and as you said earlier, there is no manual for how to deal with this. Are there things you learned through your experience, things that you did right or things that you didn't do, that you would recommend our listeners if they ever have to face such a situation?
I don't think that there is a universal advice, because people deal with these situations in a very different way. And I think I was really, for better or for worse, I was already, in 43 when I got it. And I feel, this experience extremely matured me. And maybe, the listeners are much more mature than me at age 43. It really changed my understanding and perception of the world. And there is a period when you feel it very acutely. As again, time is a healer. When time goes by, things change. But there are still, a lot of parts that, it just changes how you look at the rest of your life after, after going through this experience. And, and the part that, you kind of discover there is this other world. Because when we are living in academia, we are totally stressed. Or is the paper getting in? Or did I get this grant? Or did my student get this job? Or didn't get the job? Or whatever. This is really, really important. And you need to be really serious about it, correct? To really push the boundaries and really think very hard about the problems. And in some ways, I think I would say I wouldn't say we, I would say I, infantile, because, you live in this kind of artificial world where a lot of real problems of real people are really never enter your life, because you have a very organized life. Of course, there is a stress and papers and when you become a patient, you all of a sudden see a different reality. You go, these treatments like radiation and other, happens every day. You see these people, you see a lot of sick people. You're like, how come I didn't know that these communities exist? I was not aware, the suffering and how it impacts people and how fragile we are. So this was my big eye-opening when I went through this treatment. And it's funny because MIT and MGH are just, it's a 15 minutes walk, one subway stop away, but such a different world.
Yeah, certainly your experience changed the kinds of research problems that you work on, your work with MIT Jameel Center and your other work that is about oncology. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that work that you've been doing recently?
Yeah, so actually, when I came back, I really kind of, it was rethinking, you coming back to the world, your hair starts growing back, but it takes much longer to actually become your normal self. And I started asking myself, how come I'm doing this stuff? And like one of the topics that I really like is working on undeciphered languages, which doesn't have any practical meaning whatsoever, but it's really, intellectually extremely interesting task. And I did some work. I really enjoy reading about it. And I was thinking, what is my right to work on this when there are lots of people who, don't benefit from technology, and you discover how much technology doesn't enter this world when you're part of that world, because you can't imagine even the simplest question that you want to ask. Tell me what happened to the patients like me in this hospital. They can give you some general statistics, but if you want to ask if women of this age with this particular, what happened? Even the information is electronic medical record, like what's the problem? People cannot do even that. So there are a lot of things that they cannot do that they should be doing. And many times you as a patient, you say, oh, you can do A or you can do B. It's up to you to decide. But how can you decide if you don't have the information to make the decision, correct? And at that point, when I came back, I felt, it's like I was not interested in NLP. I still had a group but my mind is like, what can I do to change it? It was like, I went through it. I have a mandate. I have to change it. And then I started going around and around these places and asking different doctors, what can I do? And typically, being, a professor, you kind of you're like a prima donna. You come, thank you so much that you want to work with me. Here I'm going, knocking on all the doors and nobody cares. And it's like, we're doing great. Thank you very much. And it took me a while until I found, what I can do to make, to what I felt to make a difference. And since then, I pretty much changed the whole direction of my research because it's not only about like taking the tools that we develop and applying it to medical data. You really need to have absolutely new machine learning algorithms to solve the real problems, not just to do something. You can do something. There are a lot of problems that you can solve just by taking what is out there and applying it. But there are like millions of problems for which we don't have a good computational solutions. And, and the longer I am in it, the more I see these big issues.
It's very interesting. Changing a research area is always tough, and changing one to a very applied research area is even tougher. And as you said, you went and knocked on many doors before you finally came to, I guess, a set of problems you wanted to work on and a set of people who would work with you. I guess the takeaway for me is to be persistent from your experience.
No, I want to correct you. What I actually thought to myself, and that's why I never worked on clinical NLP or whatever, because I thought it's like apply thing. It's like people who cannot, it was really obnoxious of me to think so. I said people who cannot really compete on the methods in NLP, they just take an existing tool in NLP and apply it to medical records and get some paper. This is not the case. Okay, you can do it and you can even get out something. But like if you're thinking, like in 2017, one of the topics that I studied I studied in 16, but in 17 there was the first paper. Tommy Yakala and I and our students at MIT, we started working on modeling small molecules. And this area was really not part of kind of core machine learning. We know that in machine learning, there are methods, there is natural language processing, there is computer vision. There was even, sequencing stuff. But modeling the molecules and their properties and other things, it wasn't there. I had to beg my students to work on it because they said, it's not really machine learning. And since then, this field really grew, and there is a lot of new methods work. How do you represent correctly the molecules? Is graph convolution is the right way to go. We've seen the amazing advancement that happened on the the protein models. This is a very, very active field that really changes. Super exciting field, and it's not. It has an application, but research itself in this field is actually very much methods driven. And in this case, the reason I think I could jump into it relatively easy because the field didn't really exist at the time. This was a similarity with NLP, that when I entered NLP, it was at the moment of the transition. So it happened to be that in chemistry slash drug design with deep learning, this was the field that was really on the earliest stages. And I actually, when I started working with it, I didn't even connect it to the drugs because I was in this exploratory stage. I said, I don't know what I want to do. And Professor Klaus Jensen, who is a professor in chemical engineering, approached me. He was introduced to me by my then department head, Silvio Michali, who is a Turing Award winner. He introduced me to him because I just needed some machine learning person on their DARPA grant related to how to do retrosynthesis, which means to identify the path of generating molecule. And I thought, okay, why not? I will try. And when I started talking and looking what is available, Tommy, who from the beginning worked with me and was a collaborator on the grant, we realized it's really a humongous opportunity here in terms of algorithms, and maybe doing it for a year or two. I look from my window and now I see, from my window, I see Amgen, I see Novartis, I see Moderna from a window from MIT. And why wouldn't we connect it to actually drugs? There was a connection. Because I was working on imaging and predicting cancer from mammograms and other things, but then I realized it's also a potential to do it for therapeutics. And that's how we, pivoted this work into the therapeutic area. So, when I'm looking at this path, it was kind of really non-direct path. When I committed to work on, on cancer, I thought cancer is, NLP extraction from medical record. It's, deep learning from images to predict, progression of the disease or to predict who is going to get the disease. I didn't even connect this work. It took me 2 years to connect it. But now this is kind of most of what I'm doing today.
That's amazing that you've been able to convert that motivation into really, really useful research program. If you liked this episode, then you can also listen to the full interviews with each of these amazing technologists in Season 2 of our show. That's in episodes 24 through episode 35. Each interview features the origin story of the technologist, their educational path, their decision and thoughts on immigration, obstacles they faced along the way, and a discussion on their retrospectives and perspectives. Check it out. Again, that's episodes 24 through 35 in Season 2 of our show. As usual, you can find all episodes and detailed episode guides on our website, csimmigrant.org. Again, that's csimmigrant.org. And you can find us and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and basically wherever you get your podcasts. All the music used in episodes of the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast is royalty-free. All voice recordings were performed with and are reproduced with full consent of narrators and participants. You can find music credits on our website. Join the online discussion about this podcast on all major social media, including Twitter and Facebook, with the handle CSImmigrant and hashtag CSImmigrant. And of course, the episode guide is available at our website, csimmigrant.org. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists Podcast.